Hello everyone and welcome again to the next edition of the webinar series at the Ball State Center for Professional Selling. I'm thrilled to have one of our alums again, Mo Bunnell, who is a CEO and who's an actuary turned sales guru, who is the author of the best-selling book, The Snowball System. And we had recently talked to Mo about some of the key aspects of the book, but there were so many things to discuss that we thought, why not have him back, ask him to take time off his busy schedule and share some of his thoughts with us about each book. But this time we go in detail. So essentially what I've actually done is that I've taken a look at the book, and there's some very interesting insights that I want to get Mo's opinions about. So Mo, once again, thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedule. And I'm sure it's pretty much warmer in Atlanta than here. I guess there's still the glow with Super Bowl right now, but thank you for joining us again.
Well, thank you. I'm excited. I had a blast the last time we talked. I'm excited to go deeper, just like you said.
Yeah. So Mo, one of the things which really struck me the last time, we were talking about some of the basic aspects of the book as well, but now I want to sort of dig into different chapters of the book and some key insights that I think for those people who are still thinking maybe should we be buying this book might actually give them some more ideas and reasons as to why they would like to purchase this book. And I'm going to kickstart with the first chapter where I really love it, because you talk about, you need to be having big ideas, but you're going to start small, right? And I love this idea, but many people forget that. So what made you begin your book with this chapter?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, we use a maxim all the time in all of our training classes called think big, start small, scale up.
Indeed, yeah.
And one of our clients taught us that. I wish I would have come up with something that clever. I didn't. But what John taught us was, in that simple 6 words, is that the think big part of really anything is you want to change the world. Maybe you want to change your own ability to do business development, or you want to change your organization's trajectory, or you've got a client where they could be benefited by purchasing your services in some big, massive way. Well, those sort of dreams are really important because they provide you direction. I'm headed in that direction. The problem is it can be really difficult to say yes to something from here all the way to there. And what the start small part is that, hey, my think big is I'm heading in that direction. Start small is I'm going to start with the smallest little thing possible. If we're talking about our own business development skills, we might just say, hey, next week I'm going to pick 3 proactive things that I haven't been doing that have been bugging me, but gosh darn it, I'm going to do those 3 proactive things to deepen a relationship with somebody that hasn't been responsive to me, or I don't know. And then the last 2 words, scale up, just says, if I do those kind of things every day over the period of a year, if I did 3 proactive things once a week over a year, that's 150 things or so I wouldn't have done otherwise. And now I'm moving very much closer to my think big, my dream. So I feel like those 6 words are ridiculously powerful when people take them and do them.
Indeed. But for me, what struck me was the fact that you talk from a sales angle, but this is also true from your customer side, right? So especially when you're going and talking to a customer who does not know you a lot, and you're asking them to place their trust in you, it always helps to actually, give them the bigger picture, but tell them, hey, listen, we'll take it one step at a time. For me, that was what was the most powerful. That is things that you apply for yourself.
Yeah.
But as long as we are still in the realm of human to human interactions, that we also need to have apply the same thing to our customers too. For me, that is what I think this is very powerful, is I can take learnings from this for myself, but I should also understand that anytime I'm doing this, the customer also has to go through this change process, through this complete idea. The more I can understand this, the better I can build long-lasting relationships, which is what is the purpose of your book eventually, right? When we talk about dealing with this. So I thought that's what struck me the most. That's why I think it's great that you can use the mantra for yourself, but also keep in mind that the person sitting on the other side might also need help along the same path. They also might need to see the vision behind it. And they also might need to say, you know what, yeah, the vision is great, but again, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So that's what I absolutely loved about the fact is that, you need to do that. And that is, again, something that I loved about the first chapter. The fact is that, yes, you have great concepts coming up afterwards, but you know what? You'll have a lot of concepts, but again, think small, but be aware of what is going to come going forward. I love that part about the book.
Yep.
So,
and I'll add on, because you're so right on that you can use this externally, and it's totally appropriate to actually discuss this with your client, with your customer, to say, hey, listen, in our business, we're going to change the complete orientation of your culture to be more around business development and being proactive in growth. But we can't do that in a month. But the best thing we can do in a month is to run a pilot class with 16 or 20 people in it. And if we really hit a home run there, we're on our way, and then we just continue to do things after that. So as we work with our clients, we want to test our dreams with them, test the think big, if you will, see what they want, see how we can help them, and then just start with really simple steps. And we're always reminding each other of the bigger dream, if you will.
Indeed. So now moving on. So let's say, for example, you want to grow big. The next chapter for me was, I love the title of the chapter. It's called The Flywheel, right? So essentially you call it the flywheel. And can you give me a little bit more idea about where you came up with the idea of a flywheel?
Oh, well, this is a fun one. Each of those chapters went through 30 revisions before the manuscript was locked down. So coming up with specific words and specifically the titles of chapters are disproportionately important. The idea of the flywheel was that as you start a flywheel, it can be very difficult. Think if you're on a rowing machine, that first pull is the hardest pull. There's a flywheel inside there providing resistance. But the second one's a little bit easier. The third one's a little bit easier. So if we can develop systems in our BD capabilities and our organization's abilities that sometimes can be very difficult at first, but they're basically habits. They're the kind of things that once we get them cemented, we're on autopilot. Then the flywheel turns faster and faster and faster to, as it gets going very quickly, it doesn't take much of a pull at all, and it cycles several times with one pull, as opposed to the first time, it might only go half a turn with one full pull. So the idea of flywheel is all about having the right habits, both for yourself and your entire organization, and getting them focused on the big proactive business development things that they can do, so that the right habits are in place. And then if you get that going, you almost can't stop your growth, even if you try.
It's like, for me, it's almost like a couple of things. So then I guess that's where you also had the inspiration for the snowball kind of effect. And that's, I know that we had talked about this the last time. But for me, it's one of those things that how you well eloquently put this. And I'm guessing that when you say 30 iterations, it sort of makes sense. Because usually what we would say is we'd say just try to look for economies of skill and scale and scope. And essentially all of that are just boring terms. But to understand the flywheel, it's easy for everybody to visualize this rather than talk about abstract terms. And that's what I absolutely love, is how you make it very hands-on rather than trying to pontificate or say this is what it is. And that's one of the things I absolutely like. But which brought me to the next one, which is actually one of the practices that you have. And I must confess that I've heard of Ptolemy, but I said you have the protomoi list.
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing it right? So I've heard of Ptolemy and the philosophers and stuff like that. But the protomoi, can you give our viewers a little bit of an insight of what a protomoi list is?
Yeah, well, I love what you're picking out of the various chapters, because that's my favorite part about that chapter as well. The idea of a protomoi list is it's based on the definition of the word, it's a Greek word, and the definition is roughly first among equals. And we love the idea of first among equals. What the idea of a protomoi list is for someone to take a look at their relationships, and not necessarily the people they know now or the people they know best, because that's what we're anchored on psychologically. That's what most people just go to, is the people that we're already friendly to, and they're friendly with us. That's easy. But rather to make a list of the people that we should know, or the people that we want to be really, really great ambassadors and friends of ours, business associates, say in 3 years from now. And if we can write a list of, say, the 10 people that are the most important to our business development success over the next 3 years, then once we write those down, then we can start investing in those people because they're the most important, instead of the people we might normally invest in because they're the easiest. So this simple shift in mindset to being proactive about the relationships that are most important to our future success is really important. And the beginning of that is a list. And then the execution of that is month in and month out,
Absolutely.
always finding some way to add value in those people's lives. And then you start to shape your relationship ecosystem, if you will, the way it should be, as opposed to the way it just naturally goes.
Indeed. And what I really like about that is one of the things that you mentioned is it does not always have to be customers, right? It could also be prospects that, hey, these are the people that we would like to bring in. And essentially that's what you're trying to say is that it's not cold, it's not conniving, it's a genuine way to actually want to build those relationships because these people could help you moving forward. So I'm assuming that we are also talking about prospects, am I correct?
That's right. And you hit a home run with that. And not only is it clients that already buy things for you, but prospects. But a third bucket that's very important to a lot of people's success are what we call strategic partners, people that routinely provide referrals for you. So I think of a client that has of ours that would have more of an episodic work. Say they're in high stakes litigation in a law firm, and they have to have a deep legal expertise, but they also have to do business development. Well, they may know who's going to be served. They may not know who's going to get sued. So it might be difficult for them in certain types of litigation to actually go directly to clients. But what they could do is say go to insurance brokers that are the first to know if there's been something happen around litigation, or other experts that are in their industry that would be the first to know. And they might develop relationships with those people, the best of the best in those areas, and then they are referred when a bad thing happens to somebody, which is a good thing for their business. So, I think all three of those groups are really important: clients, prospects, and strategic partners. And we talk about that in the book of how to have the right ratio of each, depending on your business and things like that. But you really hit on something important. Most people just think, oh, this is just clients, but those other two groups might be just or more important.
Absolutely. Which is then you move on. So essentially, of course, there's much more interesting things that I would recommend the readers to delve into in this chapter. But in the interest of time, if I want to move on to the next chapter, which is how do you try to target your ideal clients? So of course, you have a list. Now you want to target them. And what struck me here, which I think is extremely critical, is the power of positioning. You talk about positioning as well. So can you give a little bit more insights as to why you think positioning is extremely critical with your target clients or with your prospects and everybody else?
Yeah, and what's neat about your questions are so practical. I love it because even if somebody didn't get the book, they get that value from this video. We can give them tips. Like in the last conversation we had, a quick tip that's super practical would be, hey, just write down a list of 10 people you want to deepen your relationship with. I mean, just doing that is really valuable. On this idea of positioning, the science shows that not only do people remember concepts in threes the best, but they believe it when you say you're good at three things more than if you said you're good at 1, 2, 4, and the researchers tested all the way to 10. So there's this magic about threes. And not only are concepts in threes more believable, but they're more memorable. So the quick and practical tip of positioning yourself here would be to figure out who you're for. Not necessarily where your business has been. Of course, that's important. You want to build from that. But going forward in the future, who are the types of clients that you really want to serve? And then trying to come up with sort of three concepts or three messages that you could say you're great at, that they would believe and be memorable. And then your targeting lines up with your positioning. So if your positioning is focused on three things, then you would develop targeting criteria that would find organizations that want those three things.
Absolutely.
And now everything's lined up internally and who you're trying to meet so that you can have the most efficient success possible.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. The way I look at it is the closest I can think of is something like a value proposition, except that you sort of do it for yourself. Again, there are a couple of things, right? There's the customer is buying from you. Let's not talk about the future where your bots are going to buy from the bots. We are now still in the era where it's human to human, right? So for me, from that viewpoint, I always say my biggest sale to date was convincing my wife to choose me over anybody else, right? People forget that that's also a sales process. And I always said, so when I met my wife, my wife is French. And so when I met my wife, my value proposition is I was competing against all the other French men, and I could not compete on looks. So the only thing I had was, let me take a look at what I had and what is my value to her, which is very interesting. was I did not have 3 points, I had only one. My parents were 5,000 miles away. So, which at that point was fantastic because she did not have to see them all the time. So essentially, I found out one thing that was critical. I'm sure there's much more to it than that, but for me, that's what strikes me is that's what it is. And then her value proposition to me was her parents do not speak English, so it was perfect. So I didn't have to talk to my in-laws. And the idea is that I love this concept of positioning yourself because at the end of the day, people still buy from people. Yes, you have to position your organization as why your organization might be the best possible fit for the customer or the target or the prospect. But from the viewpoint of as an individual, let's face it, if you're talking especially to a prospect where you're an unknown, yes, your organization is known, and hopefully you might have the luck of working for a big organization. But what if you're working for a small startup where nobody knows anything about the organization? Then it is you. It is you, and you need to build that personal brand. And I think that is where I love this. So essentially for me is the key is, yes, you need to do small things. And I think one of the small things that I would take away from it as well is, yes, what do I want to do for my customers, but also how do I build my own brand? It goes back to your first chapter is a brand is not built overnight, neither is your personal brand. So that is what I like about this. The first chapter sets the stage for so many things, either for yourself or for your firm or for your customer's firm. And the idea is that in each of these you need to apply. And if my takeaway would be is that I would pretty much have 3 columns where I would literally say what is in it for each one of us in each step and see what are the small things that I would do. Am I making sense out here?
I love it. Yeah, I really do.
Yeah,
and I loved your marriage positioning example too. I might steal that.
Yeah, absolutely. Usually it gets a chuckle as well. So, which is something that I think is very interesting. And that's what I like. So for me, every chapter for me is like a step. There are so many things out there, but if you want to get something in 25 minutes, these are the key things. Which is what I want to build to your next chapter, which is what I absolutely love. It is about get people to like you, but I love it within parentheses you say authentically. And I love it. And then you build on something which is very, very, people don't think it is possible. People think of salespeople as being manipulative. But you talk about relationship-driven business development, right?
Right.
And how do you tie this into the fact that salespeople are seen as people who would even sell out their folks to get business? And what you're talking about is building a relationship and being seen as authentic. How do you make that connection?
Yeah. Oh, well, it's funny. We do our when we do our live sessions. Typically, one of the first things we do is we have say it's a group of 20 people.
Yeah.
They shout out what they think of a time in their life where they purchased something, and the process went great. And they shout out what made it great. Yeah. What they were learning. It was easy. The salesperson provided simple options. The salesperson knew more than they did, so they were being guided in an expert way. They were flexible. The salesperson listened to them first to figure out what they really needed instead of, I've got this stuff and I'm going to try to make you buy it. Manipulation, like you were talking about. And it goes on and on and on, where you'll have 20 or so descriptors of what makes a buying process great. And then we'll shout out, have everybody shout out what things make it not go so great. Well, lying, not making it easy, unresponsive. I knew more than the salesperson did, didn't get value from the situation, felt high pressure, manipulation, things like that. And that's where sales can get a bad rap, a bad name. And so what's great is in sales, we get to, if we're the salesperson, the business developer, we design the best experience. We get to design an experience that we're proud of, that's authentic, that always has the client, the customers, their best in mind. And being likable, like you said in parens, authentically, is all about always doing the right things for others. Yeah. And then we walk through 5 specific things that you can do in addition to actually learn the skill of likability. This is a skill that can be improved, that can be learned. And it's all about authenticity, because the science shows that if somebody feels pressure or they feel manipulation, they want to run the other way and never talk to that person again. Absolutely. So that underpinning, like you just said, the underpinning of authenticity throughout this whole process, and learning these other levers that you can move to actually dial up your authentic version of likability. It's a skill that can be learned, and it's one of the most important pieces of business development. Wow. I mean, what do you think?
For me, it's one of those things which is what I've realized, and in my time being either in the academic profession or before when I was in sales as well, is that for some reason it's very naive for you to think that the buyer is always going to be gullible and is not going to see through you, right? And I think the fact is that I think you should be true to yourself, because at the end of the day, if you truly cannot help the customers, you may get the customer once, but you're not going to get the customer again. That's number one. And essentially that's what it is. And again, when I was in sales, luckily for me, maybe I did not do too many bad things, but there was also no social media where people could go and complain about me. But today, if people are going to start complaining about you, then you're going to have an issue afterwards, because your reputation is also going to take a hit after that. That goes back into your personal branding. Your organization might be great, but might say, you know what, that person from that organization is out there not to help us, but to actually make their big commissions, big fat commissions. So in my opinion, you have to kind of be there. You have to build your brand. You should be seen as a person that you could trust. And it means sometimes walking away from a deal, or telling the customer, saying that, listen, I'm going to give you all this, but I think you're better off with maybe a different player. And essentially when that happens, you are being authentic. The customer is actually going to see that you are looking out for them. And I believe I've seen this very strange idea of trust built into the fact that you have the trusted advisor, where you talk about how you're going to help the customer, but the denominator of that is, are you focused on the customer, or are you self-focused? And the idea is that, the more self-focused you are rather than the customer, your trusted advisor status goes down. So that for me is in my opinion, the key takeaway. That's why it struck a chord with me. This chapter was, for me, one of the most insightful, because when you said within brackets, within parentheses, authentically, that hit the nail on the head as well.
Yes. So, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because it's often missed in salespeople and things like that. And to tie back quickly to your flywheel idea, think if you're always advising the client on the right, or the prospect on the right thing for them 100% of the time, well, you're building these relationships to generate, be in a position where you're a trusted advisor, like you mentioned. And then eventually, in the 7 steps we cover in this chapter, the sort of the pinnacle of the 7 relationship steps, if you will, is Raving Fans, where people are actually running around telling others about you. So if I tie that back to the flywheel idea, if we are always doing the right things for our clients, telling them to hire us or not based on authentic advice, steering them to others if they're a better fit, then we're basically moving very quickly. We're moving people very quickly to Raving Fan, where we could get dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of people that are running around telling others to call us. And then that's part of what makes the flywheel go so well, is always doing the right things for these people. And then they're almost like say you had 1,000 Raving Fans, you've got almost 1,000 person sales force working for you. And that's only because you've done the right things for them. And so this idea of the flywheel around relationships is critically important and often missed.
Absolutely. And I think so what we're going to do at this point is we're going to stop this webinar here with the idea that now we have the foundations of the book. And when we come back in the next webinar, we'll actually get into how do we go about, now that we have the foundations, how will we build on this and actually go out there and turn our prospects into clients, our leads into our customers, into Raving Fans as well. Thank you, Mo, and I look forward to the next webinar.
Perfect. Thanks. This is fun.
Mo Bunnell graduated from Ball State in 1990 and is the founder and CEO of Bunnell Idea Group, who has taught business development skills to over 12,000 people. You can learn Mo's methods in his book, The Snowball System, How to Win More Business and Turn Clients into Raving Fans, at snowballsystem.com, and get a gratis 8-part video training on creating demand at createdemandcourse.com.